In this video, we're going to talk about try except in Python, and you will learn what are try, except, else, and finally are. But before beginning, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and if you enjoyed this video, please like it. Let's begin. There are four statements that are used when you want to handle an error in Python. The first one is try, and the second one is except, and else, and the last one is finally. Let's talk about try here. Try block lets you test a block of code for errors. If an error occurs, except block will be executed, and this block lets you handle the error. And if no error is raised, else block is executed, and regardless of the result, whether there is an error or not, finally block will be executed. Okay, and I'll tell you how you can actually use these statements by an example. Let's write an example here. I use try block because I want to test whether this line that I'm gonna write will raise an error or not. Okay, so I write, for example, print x, and now as you see here, x is not defined. So if I actually run this without try, let me run this, you will face an error because x is not defined. So now I want to handle this error. What can I do? I actually need to put this line inside try block. So I write try, and inside this block I'm going to write print x. Okay, and then I have to write except block because I want to handle this error. And when actually this line raise an error, this block is executed, and I can write whatever I want inside this block. For example, I want to print something went wrong, and if I run this code instead of this error, I will see this line only. Okay, so if I run it, you see this line is executed and something went wrong is written. And instead of actually crashing the program, you can handle that error. You can define as many exception blocks as you want. For example, if you want to execute a special block of code for a special kind of error. For example, in here, print x will raise an exception because this variable x is not defined. Okay, and you can have here except, and you wanna in front of this say name error. Okay, and you can also have another exception for other actually errors, except. Okay, and in here you can write print, for example, let's change this one, something went wrong. In here we don't know what went wrong, but in here, because it's name error, we know that this variable is not defined. So we can say x is not defined. Okay, and if I run it, you see x is not defined because the error that is raised by this line is name error, and so this block is executed, and print, this print actually is executed. But for example, let's change this one and write another codes that raise another exception. So for example, in here I want to define x, and I want to assign, for example, a string like hello, and the second line I'm going to add, for example, an integer here, 15, and I want to print x plus y. From previous episode, you know that we cannot add a string and integer together, and this will raise an exception or error. So because this is not name error, this line is not going to be executed, and this exception, whatever is inside this exception block, is going to be executed. So if I run it, you see something went wrong, and this except, whatever is inside this except, is executed. You can write another thing. For example, in here you can write print something else like I'm in. This is an example. Just you see this line is also executed, whatever is inside this block. In some conditions, you want to define a block of code to be executed if no error were raised. For example, in here, as you see, I'm gonna print welcome, and this line will not raise any error. So this block, this except block, and the next one will not be executed. Okay, so if I run it, you see welcome is printed here and nothing happened. And for this example, I want to use else here. This is for the time that no error is occurred. Okay, so inside of this block, I'm going to write print, for example, everything is okay. And if I run it, you see this block is executed because no error is raised. And now I want to change this line. For example, instead of welcome, I want to write a variable inside it that is not defined. So in here, I expect that this block is going to be executed. And so because we're going to go inside one of the except, so else is not going to be actually executed. So if I run it, you see everything is okay is not printed because we raised an error and we handle this inside this except. And the last block is finally block, and if it is specified, this will be executed regardless of whether an error is occurred or not. Okay, for example, in here, let's add finally block, and inside this block, I'm going to write print, for example, end of try except. Okay, and whether error raised or not, this line, this block will be executed. Let's test it here. For example, if I run it, you see here we've raised an error. We went to this block first, and the last one is this block. And let's change this to, for example, welcome again. This will not raise error, and we expect that this line to be executed regardless of whether an error is occurred or not. So if I run it, you see the first line is welcome itself, and the second one is else here because there is no error, so we went to this block, and the last one is finally block. So you see here whether there is an error or not, finally block is executed. You can also throw an exception if a condition occurs. Okay, you use raise keyword and exception in order to write your exception. Okay, for example, in here I write x equal to 0, and if x is lower than for example 5, I'm gonna raise an exception. I'm gonna throw an exception. I say raise here keyword and exception, and whatever I pass between these parentheses, whatever I write will be written as an error. Okay, for example, in here I write sorry, something went wrong. And if I execute this, you see, sorry, something went wrong. I threw an exception. You can also define what kind of error you want to throw. Okay, in addition to this line, which is the text that is shown here, you can also define what kind of error, okay, you want to throw. In here, I just threw an exception. Now I want to throw, for example, type error. Okay, and if I execute this, you see, the type of exception is actually clear here, type error. You can also change it to name error. Okay, here you see name error is here. So depending on what kind of error you may raise, you can also here define the kind of error. Here is the end of this session. I hope it was useful for you. If you want to learn more about Python and other programming languages, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and if you enjoyed this video, please like it. It will be a great support. Bye for now.